Hi everyone, welcome to Last Book Alive. I am joined today by my friend Mahithi, and we're going to be talking about the poet Mahmoud Darwish. We're discussing two of his books. One is A River Dies of Thirst, and the second is Unfortunately It Was Paradise. But obviously, along the way, we will probably discuss maybe references to other works. But Mahiti is here with me, and I wanted to just turn it over to her. So, Mahiti, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Meher. Thank you very much for inviting me to Last Book Alive. My name is Mahithi Pillay, and I am a poet. My interest in Mahmoud Darwish is, of course, it's inextricable from my uh, love for poetry. I have been writing. I've been published, over the past decade or so in anthologies of poetry anthologies in India and abroad. And by day, I work as a writer. My background is in literature as well as journalism. So I used to be a active business journalist. Now I'm more in corporate content. Mm, that's a little bit about me. I think we should get started. Over to you.
Yeah, so basically, we're recording this on Sunday, 24th, but this will be published on Land Day. So I just wanted to just for 2 minutes just to give a brief kind of information about what Land Day is and what it means to Palestinians. So Land Day basically on March 30th, 1976, there were six Palestinian citizens of Israel who were killed, and they, along with many others, were protesting in historic Palestine, in occupied Palestine as well. And the protests were against forced land grabbing by Israel of Palestinian lands. And there was a general strike, and there were mass demonstrations all across occupied Palestine and Israel. And there were 50 people who were injured, and the police detained about 300 protesters. And basically, this was a turning point because after this, the Palestinians in Israel, especially, they became like a structured kind of force. And that is, and so basically, and like became like a presence as a national group inside Israel that went beyond local struggles, according to PalQuest. So since then, aside from the Nakba, Land Day has been commemorated as a way for Palestinians to assert their commitment to their land and home and to resist Israeli land grabbing. Um, so that's the day that this episode will be published. Um, yeah, and I also just wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in Palestine right now. As you know, like I started doing this this year, started this year just talking about focusing on books from Palestine, and yeah, I just think it's important that all of us engage and try to learn as much as we can about what's happening. So in that context, as everybody knows, situation in Palestine is really bad, and in Gaza is really bad. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that Israel is blocking aid trucks, um, and that's a moral outrage. WHO chief said that children in Gaza are dying from malnutrition, and the only way to prevent famine is for large-scale food deliveries to happen on the ground, which it's not because it's being blocked. And UNRWA has said that 2.3 million people in Gaza, for 2.3 million people in Gaza, famine is imminent. And yeah, by May this year is when they expect famine to occur if the situation continues as is. And yeah, I mean, 13,450 children have died since October 7th. In Rafah, 16 premature babies died due to malnutrition related cases over the course of 5 weeks. So that's what's happening. We're talking about Mahmoud Darwish and his poetry, and I wanted to turn it over to you now. Wanted to ask you actually when and how you first came across Mahmoud Darwish's poetry.
just the scale of devastation and the 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 loss of human life. I mean, I want to start from there. Unprecedented, and deeply distressing. Like I feel that I don't have, even though I work with words for a living, I feel like I don't have words to kind of share my grief over what is unfolding, and the fact that it that it continues unabated. That's, I think, the worst feeling of all. Um, the reason, or the earliest memory that I have of Darwish's work is from college, from my grad school days, and I think it was our the subject that we were um, you know that that was connected to that I connect to Darwish in my head. It was political science, because
Mm,
my professor in those days, the my grad school professor, he had a very unique approach to teaching. So he would take it. He would approach texts, or key moments in history that we needed to learn about. He would approach it not just from one very textual analysis, from that point of view, but he would bring in art, he would bring in poetry, he would bring in
mm,
songs, he would bring in art in any way possible. And it I feel like it gave us a more well-rounded understanding of these issues. I could I could
mm,
quote so many examples right now, but basically uh, that's when I first encountered Darwish, as in a political science class,
mm,
um, and if I'm not mistaken, and the memory is very clear in my head, because that page, the page that was shared, it stayed in my mind. I don't have a clear memory of the poem, but I remember very clearly the themes that it spoke of, and the overwhelming theme was that of exile, of dispossession, of
mm,
yearning for a homeland that, uh, how do I put it? It exists, and yet there is no way for you to return, to that homeland. As in, it's a sort of, it's a deeper loss. It's a deeper
mm,
level of. I feel like it's a deeper experience of exile, of dispossession, and that's my earliest memory of Darwish. Of course, in the course of my, in the course of my reading, and over the course of time, I also read other poetry on similar themes by by poets like Agha Shahid Ali, for instance, and we spoke about this. I really do see parallels between Agha Shahid Ali writing about Kashmir, and
mm,
Darwish writing about Palestine, and in many ways, the scale of devastation, I think, is comparable. Uh,
mm,
in many ways, the dispossession is comparable, but I know there is uh, no matter how many connections I try to weave in between Kashmir and Palestine, I know that this is Palestine is a unique, you know uh, situation in its entirety. So I think if I could turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about the Land Day, or about Palestinian history, I think that would really supplement the poetry part of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mahithi, for that. That actually that's really interesting. Like I would have loved to be in that class that you were talking about how your professor brought different strands just to talk about politics, but then weaving in different things. And I think like yeah, there is a connection to politics when we speak about Darwish or we speak about any poet who's writing about his times. Um, but yeah, and also Agha Shahid, I think we did speak about it, and I don't know if you have any, if you would like to
I
read
do.
later on.
I and
Okay,
I mean, I have
yeah.
my I actually it gave me goosebumps because we've been over the past year we've been in the middle of moving home, and all my
Hmm.
books are all over the place, and it's for someone who loves reading, it's very you feel like your brain is scattered all over the place, and so I came looking for my poetry books, and everything is in a mess right now. So I'm not even kidding. I opened one cupboard, no, the second cupboard, right there in front of me, the book was there, and it just gave me
Wow.
goosebumps because I went looking for it, and
Yeah, it was
it
meant
had
to be.
I had given up hope. I thought, okay, I'm too late. The recording is tonight. I should have looked for it earlier. And, I was kind of like
Yeah,
berating myself inside my head, but I found
right
it on
there.
the second try. Yeah. So I do plan to read from it as well. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Let me just get to first to uh, Darwish and his early life. So, yeah, so this is from the intro to Unfortunately It Was Paradise and then mixed with other kind of sources. So, Darwish is called the soul of Palestine. He is called the Nobel laureate, the poet laureate of Palestine. He is the author of 30 books of poetry and 8 books of prose. And among many other awards, he's also won the Lenin Peace Prize. He was born in al-Birwe village in Galilee in the district of Akka in Upper Galilee, Palestine, on March 13th, 1942, so just passed. When he was 6 years old, in the Nakba of 1948, the Israeli army occupied and then destroyed his village, along with 416 other Palestinian villages. So the Darwish family fled to Lebanon, and because of that, they missed the official Israeli census, which was recording all these citizens. And they returned illegally, basically, a year later. And so they were kind of classified as present absent alien or internal refugees because they had not been counted by the state of Israel to be citizens. When so Palestinians who were living in Israel, they could not travel within Israel without permission. And because of that, Darwish in his later life gets arrested quite a bit because he goes to different places to recite his poetry. And one of the questions that I had when I was researching was like, how did Darwish become the poet laureate or the soul of Palestine? Like, what was it about him that kind of attracted people to him, made people listen to him and connect with his poetry? And so one of the books that basically I've relied heavily upon is Mahmoud Darwish, The Poet's Art and His Nation by scholar and poet Khalid Matawa. And basically, Matawa just kind of traces his poetry along with his life, just to give us a little bit of an idea. Ki, matlab, when he was writing poetry, what was happening in Palestine? How was he responding to it? Kind of. So yeah, so many Palestinian presses were shut during the time that Darwish is growing up, is starting off as a poet, and Palestinians were actually cut off from the Arab world as well. So they had neither the means to express themselves through their presses in Israel, and there was also a shutdown of their access to the outside world, to the larger Arab cultural kind of world. So what Madawa says is that it led to a development of a minor literature, and I'm not a literary scholar at all, so I've just kind of put like pieces together to understand what it is. So minor literature, what it is, in 1975, two scholars, Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, they were French, and they wrote a book called Kafka Towards a Minor Literature. And basically, what they said in basically they were talking about Kafka and European Jewish community, and um, what they said is that Kafka was a German-speaking Jewish novelist. He was living in the Czech Republic, and what was happening was that he was German-speaking, but he was cut off from the German-speaking world, and surrounding him were Czech-speaking people. So that kind of led to a development of minor literature within the German-speaking Jewish community of Czech Republic. Same way, this happened to Palestinians in Israel. Palestinians in Israel were surrounded by Hebrew speaking community, and they were cut off from the Arab world. So there were three. So basically, that's one of the characteristics of minor literature. One that which is that it's geopolitically the community is cut off. It's cut off geographically, and the second is that it's minor literature is always political. And the third that I found was that it represents a collective action or experience. So in this particular discussing this, Matawa talks about Darwish's poem Identity Card as an example of this representing the collective experience. And this being an example of minor literature, basically. So and this is one of Darwish's most famous poems, because when he wrote it, um, what happened, it became a huge hit, and he was placed under house arrest because of this poem, and became such a protest kind of song. So yeah, I wanted to know, do you have identity card with you? Like, uh,
I do have, I'll tell you which ones I found. I belong there.
mhm.
Addresses for the soul outside this place, and Athens airport.
Athens Airport, yeah, yeah. So I was wondering, would it be possible for you to, for me to share a link of identity card, and if you could read it, because I've been
Sure.
talking
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Identity card, first published, Leaves of Olives, 1964. Write down, I'm an Arab, and my identity card number is 50,000. I have 8 children, and the ninth will come after the summer. Will you be angry? I am an Arab, employed with fellow workers at a quarry. I have 8 children. I get them bread, garments, and books from the rocks. I do not supplicate charity at your doors, nor do I belittle myself at the footsteps of your chamber. So, will you be angry? Write down, I am an Arab. I have a name without a title, patient in a country where people are enraged. My roots were entrenched before the birth of time, and before the opening of the eras, before the pines and the olive trees, and before the grass grew. My father descends from the family of the plough, not from a privileged class, and my grandfather was a farmer, neither well bred nor well born. Teaches me the pride of the sun before teaching me how to read, and my house is like a watchman's hut, made of branches and cane. Are you satisfied with my status? I have a name without a title. Write down, I am an Arab. You have stolen the orchards of my ancestors and the land which I cultivated, along with my children, and you left nothing for us except for these rocks. So will the state take them, as it has been said? Therefore, write down on the top of the first page, I do not hate people, nor do I encroach. But if I become hungry, the usurper's flesh will be my food. Beware, beware of my hunger and my anger.
Okay.
So moving. I mean, bring bringing this um bringing this to to Aga Shahid Ali. I see parallels in two of his poems that, if it's okay, I would like to read out.
Yes, please.
So this one is called. It's from the collection called "The Country Without a Post Office," and this poem is called "I See Kashmir from New Delhi at Midnight." And the preface is a few lines by Yeats, and it reads, "Now and in time to be, wherever green is born, a terrible beauty. Wherever green is born, apologies, a terrible beauty is born. One must wear jeweled eyes in dry plains to will the distant mountains to glass. The city from where no news can come is now so visible in its curfewed night that the worst is precise. From Zero Bridge, a shadow chased by searchlights is running away to find its body. On the edge of the cantonment, where Gupkar Road ends, it shrinks into almost nothing, is nothing by interrogation gates, so it can slip unseen into the cells. Drippings from a suspended burning tire are falling on the back of the prisoner. The naked boy screaming, "I know nothing." The shadow slips out, beckons, "Console me." And somewhere, somehow, there, across 500 miles, I'm sheened in moonlight, in emptied Srinagar, but without any assurance for him. On Residency Road, by Mir Pan House, unheard we speak. I know those words by heart. You once said them by chance. In autumn, when the wind blows sheer ice, the chinar leaves fall in clusters, one by one, otherwise. "Rizwan, it's you! Rizwan, it's you!" I cry out as he steps closer, the sleeves of his ferran torn. "Each night put Kashmir in your dreams," he says, then touches me, his hands crusted with snow, whispers, "I have been cold a long, long time." "Don't tell my father I have died," he says, and I follow him through blood on the road, and hundreds of pairs of shoes the mourners left behind as they ran from the funeral, victims of the firing. From windows we hear grieving mothers, and snow begins to fall on us like ash. Black on edges of flames, it cannot extinguish the neighborhoods, the homes set ablaze by midnight soldiers. Kashmir is burning. By that dazzling light, we see men removing statues from temples. We beg them, "Who will protect us if you leave?" They don't answer. They just disappear on the road to the plains, clutching the gods. "I won't tell your father you have died, Rizwan." "But where has your shadow fallen, like cloth, on the tomb of which saint, or the body of which unburied boy in the mountains, bullet torn like you, his blood sheer rubies on Himalayan snow?" I've tied a knot with green thread at Shah Hamdan, to be untied only when the atrocities are stunned by a jeweled return. But no news escapes the curfew. Nothing of your shadow, and I'm back 500 miles, taking off my eyes, the mountains granite again as I see men coming from those abodes of snow, with gods asleep like children in their arms. The poem is dedicated to Maulvi Abdul Hai.
Thank you. Really takes you on a journey. Uh, and the kind of capturing the depth of destruction, you know, it reminds me of.
Right. Bringing it to the, uh, a level of one,
Hmm.
where it's harder to um, where it's harder to escape the um, the depth of this tragedy. When you humanize it, when you present to the audience a name, a person, a personality, character traits, um, what they liked, who they who they love. I mean, all of those things. I think that's what has really shaken the world's conscience at this time, because this time it's all it's all captured, like we're all witnesses in real time, and it's almost as if they're daring us to not look away, to not look away, to find it in us to not keep going with our lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the particular line of like the blood on the Himalayan snow, like I think it's pearls or rubies. Like, yeah, no, it just kind of reminded me of just this video that I saw of these men being killed by drones. And yeah,
Fortunately, I just saw it.
yeah, um, yeah,
It
I mean,
was
I think both like Palestine and Kashmir, like the extent to which the destruction has gone into the psyche, and to kind of capture that, I think that both of these poems that you've just recited, like both of them are really do capture. The first captures the anger and the sheer frustration and like the kind of like what are you gonna do kind of thing, and then Agha Shahid Ali's, it's like it's more of a, yeah, it's more of a slow burning, like capturing the tragedy of,
yeah.
yeah, um yeah, so yeah, and yeah, so I just wanted to continue with this, to go back to this idea of, like, yeah, actually it connects to why Darwish is such a soul of Palestine. I mean, this poem that you read, Identity Card, it was really like an articulation of so much years of frustration and years of being invisible, and years of being dehumanized. So he said, yes, I am an Arab, and write it down. Um, and so when Darwish started as a poet, there was already this concept of poet warrior, the idea of this poet warrior in Arabic poetry. And then these were poets whose ambition actually it was to be leaders of their tribes. And they were followed by poets who spoke about British colonial rule when Palestine came under the British mandate in 1923. And so at that point, they weren't just writing poetry, they were also like organizing and educating people against colonial rule. And so Darwish already had these traditions that he would then build on. Um,
See,
he, act-
it's also sorry to interrupt. See,
no, no.
it's also to Sahil Ludhianvi. Um,
Hmm.
used to be called the Inqilabi Shah, revolutionary poet, because he participated. And he was thrown out of college for participating in mushairas against British rule in
Hmm.
India. So I do see parallels with what you said, with what you spoke about. I mean, of poet warriors in
Hmm.
yeah
Wow.
in Sahil.
So,
Yeah.
hmm. Yeah. Anything more you want to say about Sahil Ludhianvi?
not at this point.
Okay. So, yeah, Darwish. Yeah, actually, it is interesting actually because a lot of these poets do get their start at a time when like the country is facing some kind of political crisis, and that's when these voices emerge. Um, at so many different points in India's history or any other country. But Darwish first recited his poem when he was about 8 years old. And it was addressed to a Jewish child, and he was talking about the privileges that this Jewish child had that he didn't as an Arab child living in Israel. Um, and so he didn't get like school supplies or educational possibilities. And when an Israeli general heard this, he actually called Darwish in and he reprimanded him. Um, so yeah, and so in the 1950s, Palestinians in Israel did organize rallies, and poetry was a big part of it. And this was basically a way for Palestinians to speak against erasure. And because Palestinians, they were mostly semi-literate, right? They were most like agriculture. They were mostly like into agriculture, a lot of peasants and peasant traditions and things like. So they were semi-literate, but they had a very deep connection to the land. So they responded more to like vernacular poetry rather than traditional Arabic poetry, the one like classical Arabic poetry that had been, practiced in the Arab world, and especially outside of Palestine. So Darwish kind of absorbed this and tried to keep his poetry simple. And the other thing was that Arab Palestinians were censored in Israel, right? As I mentioned, so funerals became important sites of poetry recitations, and the poet then also became a performer. Uh, so actually, Darwish, when he reads, I've heard him read on YouTube, like even this identity card, and he's an amazing performer. Like he really just I don't know if I can include it in this thing, but like yeah, it really comes out that he has this idea of poetry not just being written but also being performed in front of people. Um, so he was able to give Palestinians a voice at a time when Israel was suppressing their voices, and he did this in a way that humanized Palestinians in their own eyes because they had been so dehumanized by Israel. And he also gave them like a vision for the future. So it wasn't just that, this is our present and this is what we're dealing with, but this is what we can aspire to, which is freedom, which is, self determination, things like that. And he did this by talking about the Palestinian attachment to their land. That was the core of it, because that was the only thing that, or the most important thing that separated them from the Israeli settlers that had come in from, Eastern European countries. Um, and it was a direct response to Israeli poets writing about their attachment to the land because this is very recent. Like Israel has just become a state in 1949, so you have this kind of effort even from the side of Israeli poets and intellectuals to try and assert their attachment to this land and to justify it. So what Darwish said was that he was in competition with these poets, these Israeli poets who were trying to assert their. So he actually, I'm going to quote him. So one of the most famous Israeli poets is Yehuda Amichai, and Darwish says, Amichai wants to use the landscape and history for his own benefit, based on my destroyed identity. So we have a competition. Who is the owner of the language of this land? So, uh, okay, so now I want to turn it over to you, Mahithi. I mean, do you want to respond to what I read, or I have another question for you as well? Should I ask you?
Yeah. Go ahead with the question.
Okay, so I wanted to actually, because I'm in California right now, so I don't know what's happening in India, but have there been protests? The last I heard was a protests were being suppressed in India.
I think it is necessary. It is necessary to get to be out on the streets to to be heard online, to kind of signal boost and sort of amplify the personal accounts that are emerging from Palestine, and really not underestimate the power of your own voice or your own you know I'm struggling to find words. Uh it's so hard to kind of take a step back and try to analyze this from a like a third person perspective, and give a give give commentary on what's
Hmm.
happening, um because I know how it feels. Rather, I don't know that it is futile, but it feels futile, uh because it feels like no one's listening. It feels like there are thousands of people who are relaying to you in real time their suffering, their uh, basic struggles. I mean, uh, to deny people food, to have to line up for food. You know, I just cannot imagine how that must feel. I mean, to not just be uh, to not just to not just be forced to flee home. I mean, the idea of home, of course, it's central to a poet's conscience. So to not just be forced to flee, but then be forced to line up for aid, and then be attacked while they're lining up for aid. It's just it's levels of distress that I cannot um sometimes I
Process.
just cannot take it. I cannot process
Process.
it. Those reports of hospitals being bombed, those
Hmm.
visuals of hospitals. I mean, having gone through cancer, to hear reports of um, cancer hospitals that have been destroyed, and I mean, just the idea that uh, there is already so much suffering in the world. There is already so much suffering. I mean, to be born is to suffer. To live as a human being is to suffer at some point or the other. But this willful uh, destruction, this willful uh, decimation of an entire identity, I think that is at the core of what my visceral response,
Yeah.
to this crisis is. We really cannot look away. We cannot stop talking about this. We cannot become desensitized, because it's a slippery slope. I mean, we're heading to a really lawless, to a really disturbing era in human history, if we see all of this every day, um, across social media, across news, all of that, and then look away. We cannot look away. I want to come back to Aga Shahid Ali and read another poem by him for you.
Yeah.
That's the title of the book. The same poem. The book is named after this poem. It's called "The Country Without a Post Office." The preface reads, "Let us send to dearest him that lives, alas, away." The preface is by Gerard Manley Hopkins. The poem reads, "Again I've returned to this country where a minaret has been entombed. Someone soaks the wicks of clay lamps in mustard oil. Each night climbs its steps to read messages scratched on planets. His fingerprints cancel blank stamps. in their archive for letters with doomed addresses, each house buried or empty. Empty? Because so many fled, ran away, and became refugees there in the plains, where where they must now will a final dew fall to turn the mountains to glass. They'll see us through them, see us frantically bury houses to save them from fire that, like a wall, caves in. The soldiers lighted, hone the flames, burn our world to sudden paper mache, inlaid with gold and then ash. When the Muezzin died, the city was robbed of every call. The houses were swept about like leaves for burning. Now every night we bury our houses, and theirs, the ones left empty. We are faithful. On their doors we hang wreaths. More faithful each night, fire again is a wall, and we look for the dark as it caves in.
I think Agha Shahid Ali, like when I read this poem and now you're reading it, I think it's meant to be read out loud because the
Absolutely.
effect that it had on me, it's like right now is much more like whoa, like and so visual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It, yeah,
Um.
I mean, it brings it brings the picture to life. It
Mhm,
again coming back to that humanization
mhm,
point. It brings that scale of tragedy from humongous to the scale of one,
mhm,
because it I'm not saying it's easier to or easier in any way or better in any way. I'm just saying when it's when you're when you're hearing of the the experiences of a single person, when they are laying their life bare in front of you, you're bearing witness. It is it, it is almost visceral, the reaction that emerges from you. I mean, um, looking at all the stories that have been coming out of Gaza of um, of, simple simple things like birthdays,
mhm,
pictures from birthdays, pictures from graduation, with someone's first job, someone's child, newborn child, someone's kid's birthday,
mhm,
and uh, like I feel so overwhelmed because you're looking at the past. You're already in those photos, in those posts about people who have been martyred. You're already looking uh, at history. You're I think thanks to the presence of social media and the internet, this is the first time that instead of a PR driven view of current events, we we are looking at it in real time as it unfolds. We are able to see the scale of the desolation. We are
mhm,
able to see the scale of absolute tragedy that is unfolding. It's like we cannot look away, but more than that, we cannot claim we did not know, we did not see,
mhm.
we saw. Um,
Yeah.
there is a poem. There is a very good poem on this theme. I think by Ilya Kaminsky, the Ukrainian poet. Uh,
Okay.
I want to read that. One second. Huh?
Okay.
Ah. I really need to read this. It's exactly what I'm trying to express, but as always, better expressed through poetry. It's by a Ukrainian poet Ilya Kaminsky, and he says, "We lived happily during the war." That's the title. And when they bombed other people's houses, we
Mm.
protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair and watched the sun. In the sixth month of a disastrous rain, in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war.
Yeah.
It's from a decade back. It's from a decade
Yeah.
back. And nothing
Yeah.
ever
I mean,
changes. Nothing ever changes. Nothing
this,
ever changes.
yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I do think that complicity is definitely there. I mean, I'm living in the US now, and I mean, I'm basically living in the country that is allowing this to happen, right? So that is something that one has to kind of reckon with, that my taxes now, whatever little I buy or whatever is going into it, because literally this could stop tomorrow if the US said there has to be a ceasefire, if the US forced Israel.
That's the difference. As in, um, by reading Palestinian literature, by reading Palestinian poetry, we 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 are saying over and over again, yes, we exist. Yes, they exist. Yes, they were here. We are bearing witness to these lives through this very, 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 very small effort. I completely understand that this is nothing. It's you know it's a drop in the ocean, perhaps. But I hope this encourages someone to read um, Darwish or read Agashai Ali and find something in there that moves them enough to bring about change, even a little
Yeah,
bit of change, even a little bit of change, even one person. I mean, you set out to change the world, and that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But you set out to change just one uh, person's perspective, or you just set out to explain all this to just one person, and you've like progressed towards change. You um and I for a writer, I feel terribly inarticulate when I when it comes to you know um when it comes to expressing how I feel about this situation. Um, but I that line by Antonio Gramsci, which says, which is pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. I think that's what needs to. I saved it.
that's a great line.
I want to actually paint it somewhere in my room, because that's exactly it. It's if I try to make sense of this scale of destruction, it's my head is going to collapse. It's we will be overcome. We are overcome of having seen all these videos, having seen almost in real time what is unfolding. But but um, if I just try to make a difference to the life of one person, so if we both talk about you know uh, poetry, Palestinian poetry, and someone is encouraged to pick up one of Darwish's books,
Yeah,
that's for me. That's not success, but that will be a satisfactory outcome. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Maiti. That was helpful. Really, it was. I think that both of us have been thinking about this and it's been on our minds and it's occupying our minds for such a long time. And I feel like I've been on this side thinking about it and you've been on this side, and it's really helpful to talk to you
And
about
like,
this because the
yeah,
level
and
of
like
frustration
reach out. Yeah,
is
absolutely.
like,
Reach out over time, space, and
yeah,
you know, continents, and make this happen. Absolutely. Thank you for this. Thank you for this initiative, because if we don't talk about this, who will?
yeah. So, I wanted to check with you about time. It's almost gonna be an hour. I
Mhm.
do have a little bit left of the Rachel's life, but I honestly don't have to get too much into it. Um, I have one poem that I wanted to read, and I had one question that I wanted to ask you. So
Sure.
maybe since we're closing to 1 hour, I could just ask you the question, and then we could
Sure.
finish off with reading some poems instead of
Great. Yeah. We can do that.
yeah. Cool. So, should I read the poem first and then
Yeah.
ask you the question? So, this was written by Darwish in 1988. This was when he has left Lebanon. He was working for the PLO there. He was a speechwriter for Yasser Arafat, one of the speechwriters. And then he left to for Paris. And when he was in Paris, that's when a lot of his work gets translated and he gets a broader audience. But this was actually a very, very controversial poem because after he wrote it, a lot of his liberal Jewish friends in Israel also stopped speaking to him. It's called Those Who Pass Between Fleeting Words. Oh, those who pass between fleeting words, carry your names and be gone. Rid our time of your hours and be gone. Steal what you will from the blueness of the sea and the sand of memory. Take what pictures you will so that you understand that which you never will. How a stone from our land builds the ceiling of our sky. O those who pass between fleeting words, from you the sword, from us the blood. From you steel and fire, from us our flesh. From you yet another tank, from us stones. From you tear gas, from us rain. Above us, as above you, are sky and air. So take your share of our blood and be gone. Go to a dancing party and be gone. As for us, we have to water the martyrs' flowers. As for us, we have to live as we see fit. O those who pass between fleeting words, as bitter dust, go where you wish. But do not pass between us like flying insects, for we have work to do in our land. We have wheat to grow which we water with our bodies' dew. We have that which does not please you here, stones or partridges. So take the past, if you wish, to the antiques market, and return the skeleton to the hoopoe, if you wish, on a clay platter. We have that which does not please you. We have the future. And we have things to do in our land. O those who pass between fleeting birds, pile your illusions in a deserted pit and be gone. Return the hand of time to the law of the golden calf, or to the time of the revolver's music, for we have that which does not please you here, so be gone. And we have what you lack, a bleeding homeland of a bleeding people, a homeland fit for oblivion or memory. O those who pass between fleeting words, it is time for you to be gone. Live wherever you like, but do not live among us. It is time for you to be gone. Die wherever you like, but do not die among us. For we have work to do in our land. We have the past here. We have the first cry of life. We have the present, and the future. We have this world here and the hereafter. So leave our country, our land, our sea, our wheat, our salt, our wounds, everything, and leave the memories of memory, or those who pass between fleeting words. Oof. Yeah, this one really. Yeah,
Do you want me to read Athens Airport?
sure.
So this is from. Unfortunately, it was paradise. What is called Athens Airport. Athens Airport disperses us to other airports. Where can I fight? Asks the fighter. Where can I deliver your child? Pregnant woman shouts back. Where can I invest my money? Asks the officer. This is none of my business, the intellectual says. Where did you come from? Asks the customs official. And we answer, from the sea. Where are you going? To the sea, we answer. What is your address? A woman of our group says, my village is the bundle on my back. We have waited in Athens airport for years. A young man marries a girl, but they have no place for their wedding night. He asks, where can I make love to her? We laugh and say, this is not the right time for that question. The analyst says, in order to live, they die by mistake. The literary man says, our camp will certainly fall. What do they want from us? Athens airport welcomes its visitors without end. Yet, like the benches in the terminal, we remain, impatiently waiting for the sea. How many more years longer for Athens airport?
Yeah, this one, I read that because Darwish left Lebanon, he became like this poet in exile. And he started to write about the Palestinian diaspora as well. So this and from that came the articulation of the Palestinian experience in exile, where it's like captured at an airport. We are basically at a standstill in terms of we have places to go, but we're still here. You know, we have a home to go to, but we can't go there, so we're going somewhere else. And these different characters from uh, these voices basically capture the Palestinian kind of, you know, bewilderment as like, you know, where do we go to do the basic things that everybody does in their normal life? So where do we go? Where's the space for us to live out our lives? You know, and then the arrogant customs official kind of being the gatekeeper for, you know, their maybe even their right to return to Palestine. I don't know if he's a symbol of that, but yeah. But I wanted to end with a question for you, and I think for me as well. I don't know, but we did touch upon it. But can you talk a bit about your connection to poetry and how it's important to you, as well as the second question is about reading as well. Like you said that you're a reader. What does reading mean to you? Yeah, I mean, what does it do for you? Also?
I tell you, this is something I feel like I might be more articulate in responding to this question. It's life without being without venturing into hyperbole. It's literally life. It's I mean, reading, of course, and it's not a linear path. I mean, having lived with and still living with depression, there have been times when I felt very disconnected from my reading. Where I've been almost unable to get the same enjoyment. And it's not just reading, depression affects everything. It affects how you approach art, or, it's actually, people think of it as some great sadness. It's not sadness. It's the um it's it's almost the absence of any emotion. And the thing is, for reading, you cannot read without emotion. I mean, it's I think it's impossible to be a dispassionate reader. You you connect. That's, I mean, that's, as a writer also, I do believe that's the whole reason people write. I mean, to you
Mhm.
know to kind of set a small boat floating on a river, and hope that someone finds your message, makes something of the message for themselves. That, I mean, as a writer, that idea is thrilling, and even as a reader, it's the same sensation when I read Darwish, or I read Aga Shahid Ali, or I read Arun Kolatkar, or I read A.K. Ramanujan, or I read if I read Edna St. Vincent Millay, or I read Emily Dickinson, or I read Lucille Clifton. Oh, I it's 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 like my beating heart. I feel like
Mhm.
I can breathe again. I know it sounds very over the top, but this is really what I mean. That is
Yeah.
exactly what poetry means to me. Nothing has touched me as deeply as, and I need to take a break here. I mean, because I'm talking a lot, I need to sip a little bit of water. So give me a moment. Uh, this is central to why we are doing this. I mean, you said poetry. I said absolutely. No question about it. I would love to talk books with you, and I would love to talk poetry with you. And this is something I can go on and on about. I can keep quoting um, you know beautiful lines from across languages, from across scripts, across geographies. It's the one thing that unites people. It's the one thing that 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 symbolizes resistance for me. um, Not just poetry, but art in general.
Yeah.
You see graffiti, you see, and I'm not trying to be like uh, deliberately facile about it. I'm just saying, think of all the ways that people uh, are able to protest through art. I'll give you an example. um, I was walking down Bandra bandstand a few days ago,
Mhm.
and there was someone had just graffitied with a stencil two simple words. It just said "Free Palestine," and they graffitied it along bandstand. And it was a very, I mean, touching. Not touching. It was very um, it was a moving sight, but some person who's obviously been hired to do this job. It's not like they want to erase,
Mhm.
Palestinian identity all over again. They're just doing their job. So they were trying to wipe it off, and it wouldn't get wiped off. And when we walked by, they were struggling with it, and just that visual of those two simple words being on the wall. Oh, it gave me life. It
Mhm.
And people have uh incorporated this into their lives in so many ways, of symbolizing that resistance, or uh, indicating to others that they are allies, that they all at some level uh, belong to the same cause. uh,
Mhm.
it has been so heartening. It has been so heartening
Mhm.
to see that. And like, more than on the streets, it is on social media, where I see all these posts. People are using art to talk about Palestine, to talk about this issue a little more, to like your posts about those quizzes that you posted about the Nakba or about Palestinian history. So I'm learning so much through those posts as well.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and I mean, coming back to what you asked, it's just life, and the kick to the solar plexus that a really moving poem delivers.
That I like that.
I can't
I like that phrase.
I
Kick to the solar
I
plexus.
yeah, I can't match that. I can't match that.
Yeah.
And there is poetry has saved my life. That's it. And I say this as someone who has battled depression, who has battled cancer. Um, it's the reason. Poetry is the reason why I'm alive. It's uh, either through writing my own poetry or talking about other people's poetry. You know, I've done sessions about Sahir in the past. You know, just uh, keeping myself and keeping myself alive through art, through poetry. I think that's what poetry means to me. That's what um, reading means to me, and it's so intrinsic to my personality or my personhood that I I mean I cannot
Yeah.
divorce myself from it.
Yeah, I think for me too, like there's so much information out there about what's happening, and yes, at times it is overwhelming. And I think that when I come back to poetry, it just within two, three lines, it percolates to okay, this is what it is, or like even this poem that I read, I mean, even when I look at videos and all, I don't cry or anything, but when I read this poem out loud, like even to myself, it just like by the third line I was like, oh, like I couldn't breathe, like that's how it was. So but anyway, so yeah, I to conclude, I wanted to ask you if you want to read one of your poems, if you feel comfortable doing so. Only if you want to and you feel comfortable.
I just can read. I can read Kohima. I think that would work. So I visited as part of my work. I used to be a business journalist. Okay. As part of my work, I traveled to the northeast part of India, and there is a cemetery in Kohima in the state of Nagaland, which is you know uh, it's a relic from the World Wars. From the World War, it is a site of a. Just give me 1 second. So this is during the Second World War,
Mm,
where it was. I mean, it was a lost cause. This particular attack by the Japanese, and uh, there are about 14 to 1500 people who are buried there. It is. I mean, you got to be there to kind of understand the impact that that cemetery has, because I still remember it's so this was a decade ago, but just just entering the cemetery, it was almost, these headstones are all evenly lined up, and it's like headstone upon just tombstone upon tombstone, all the way to where you can see like to the horizon, and then you're like overawed, you're just lost for words, and then you go to the very edge and you realize, oh, that's just one step. There are like
mm,
in steps there are like, yeah,
mm,
like there are hundreds and hundreds of tombstones, and it really moved me
mm.
to write this poem. It's called Kohima.
Okay.
I raced against time to get here. racking up permits and warnings and curfews and deadlines, flying through bamboo groves, a sunset Cinderella on wheels. But the cemetery is shut, its sole keeper having tended to his wards long before dusk. The washed blue skies had us fooled, we admit, still smarting from the sting of metal on ice on skin, while peeling dead butterflies off the bumper. And then we squelch our way in, blind leading the blind, weary at the thought of waking 2,700 poor souls from eternal rest. Youngest was 16, he sighs, his own blood resting in some old patch of earth. They never saw it coming. But who does? After all, war games on tennis courts, who thinks that up except solitary subheads in lonely newsrooms mining dictionaries for yesterday's headlines? In death, there is symmetry. Rows upon rows of gravestones gleaming off the damp grass. The armed forces' love for all things uniform. Death stretches out step upon step down the side of the hill till my heart aches for the sole woman interred among the shadows. I wouldn't find her if I tried. Each time a casket rots and the earth gives way with a deep sigh, the wealth of the common silent suffering nations is called upon to smoothen out each new curve in the soil, lest this legendary battlefield ever betray the slightest signs of human life.
Thank you, Mahithi. That was beautiful. I mean, yeah, it was it was moving, and it feels like you were there, and like it was really quiet, and you took it all in. Somehow, I feel like we were. I mean, I was there in the cemetery with you when you were reading the poem. It was really visual. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Is there anything more that you'd like to add or say? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I mean, I'm actually glad that we didn't get too much into Darwish's later life or anything. I mean, I think that we covered it the way that we did it was really great because we were like poetry interspersed with how we're feeling because I think that's more important also, like just to kind of talk about our own emotional responses and then how I don't know, poetry or whatever else we've been doing in our lives has helped us. And yeah, I just want to thank you for your time, for your words, for your poetry, for your inputs. I found speaking to you to be so inspiring, to be very comforting in a way because the things that I'm grappling with, it really helps me to see that there's somebody else out there who's also, and I'm pretty sure that there's so many other people, but because we are talking, that it really helps. Like genuinely, I'm very, very grateful to you for giving me your time and for just being a guest on Ask Book Alive. So thank you sincerely so much. Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, Mahithi.